What it do, flight crew? FTC. Flight team stand boom! Try not to get scared / potential crime 2 in 1. All right, man. You don't got to act cool with me, man. I know you got scared. I know y'all got jump scared. You wasn't expecting that one, man. I was expecting that one either. It's late at night. I'm not responsible for you wetting the bed or your jump scares, man. We back on Chillin' Scares. We got 6 most disturbing, unsolved Appalachian mysteries, man. I couldn't wait to react to this on stream with y'all. Bro, one thing I've always felt like as a human, other than just trying to explore the ocean, that's extremely brave, is you going into like mountains and shit like that. Like anything Mount Everest, any mountains, bro, that has no human civilization, you don't know what to expect. So let's see these unsolved mysteries, man. Check it out. Get your snatches of popcorn, got a little 30-minute crime scary bit.
June 14, 1969, 6-year-old Dennis Martin was spending Father's Day weekend with his family in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. He was there with his father, grandfather,
Fulton, thanks for the gifted,
and older brother near Spence Field, a remote high country area along the Appalachian Trail. It was supposed to be a simple family camping trip. Instead, it turned into one of the most disturbing missing child cases in American history. Late that day, Dennis and a few other boys decided to play a prank. The plan was to hide along the trail, wait for the adults to come by, and jump out and scare them. To pull it off, the boys split up. Dennis went one way, the others went another. A few moments later, the other boys came back, but Dennis didn't. His father, Bill Martin, started calling for him almost immediately and began searching the area on foot. There was no answer. No movement in the brush, and no sign of a little boy in a bright red shirt. And this was not easy terrain. Dennis had
Dylan Harper with the 10 gifted tier. Yo, shout my boy Dylan Harper. Spurs out there going crazy. Dylan Harper in the chat, man. W's of Dylan Harper.
Wooded mountain country where a child could disappear from view in seconds. If he had wandered off the trail, fallen, or gotten confused, the forest could have swallowed him almost instantly. As if things weren't bad enough already, they only got worse. Not long after Dennis disappeared, a hard rainstorm moved into the mountains. Heavy rain pounded the area, and whatever tracks or signs Dennis left behind were being wiped away in real time. By nightfall, the temperature had dropped too. For a 6-year-old dressed for a summer outing, not an unexpected night alone in the wilderness, this was a serious danger all by itself. Family members and rangers kept looking through the darkness, trying to find them before the mountains and weather made things even worse. By the next morning, the search had grown into something enormous. What began as a frantic family search turned into a full-scale operation involving rangers, volunteers, Boy Scouts, horse teams, helicopters, National Guard members, and even Green Berets. Before it was over, thousands of people would take part. At one point, around 1,400 searchers were involved in a single day. More than 56 square miles were eventually covered. And after all that, they still found nothing physical to indicate what happened to Dennis.
Damn.
There were leads, but none of them changed the case. For example, small footprints were found in the area.
Rod with another gifted.
They seemed
shout
to
all the subs and donos
and then disappear. They were Oxford prints, and because Dennis was wearing the same kind of shoe, the prints drew immediate attention.
My man Rod, another gifted.
Officials decided they were instead probably left by a Boy Scout helping with the search. As the days passed, darker theories started to take hold. The most famous came from a man named Harold Key, who claimed he heard a terrible scream not long after Dennis vanished. Soon after that, he said he saw a rough-looking man moving quickly through the area with something red slung over his shoulders. Dennis had been wearing a red shirt, so the account naturally drew attention, but there seemed to be a problem. The timeline and distance did not quite fit well enough. Investigators believe the man Harold described was too far from the place Dennis had last been seen, and too little time had passed for the sighting to make sense. Both park rangers and the FBI ultimately concluded there was not enough to connect the account to Dennis's disappearance. Still, the abduction theory never really died. Dennis's father believed his son had been taken, and a lot of people understood why. A child vanishes in broad daylight, and an enormous search follows, yet not one trace of him is ever found. Officials, however, lean toward a different explanation.
Right, would it get there?
They believe Dennis most likely became lost and died somewhere in the wilderness soon after disappearing. It is the least dramatic theory, but it may also be the most likely. An animal attack has also been suggested over the years, usually involving a bear or feral hog, though that theory has always had its own problems. No blood was found, no torn clothing.
Dylan said they don't get this dub. All right, Dylan, we gonna be tuned in. Yo, shout out to Dylan Harper once again,
Of a
man.
violent encounter. By June
Vibing in the
29,
stream.
the active search was called.
In the
off.
playoffs.
The volunteers were exhausted, leads had dried up, and the mountains had given up nothing. Dennis Martin was never found.
Damn, it's sad, man. I don't know what the parents is kind of like. This is just careless, letting your children just wander off in the woods like that, bro. Like,
Scott Lilly. Scott Lilly was not the kind of person most people would expect to see tackling the Appalachian Trail. He was not
Ride
some
with a
hardened
gifted
outdoorsman or seasoned long-distance hiker. But in the summer of 2011, the 30-year-old from South Bend, Indiana, decided to shoulder a backpack and head south on one of the most famous footpaths in America. Part of the appeal was history. Scott had a strong interest in the Civil War, and that helped draw him toward Virginia, a state dotted with battlefields. But this hike does not seem to have been just about scenery or history. It appears to have been something more personal, a way to clear his head and work through whatever was weighing on him at the time. On June 15, 2011, Scott set out on an ambitious journey. His plan was to hike the Appalachian Trail southbound, from Maryland all the way to Springer Mountain in Georgia. For someone who was still relatively new when it came to hiking, this was no small undertaking. But by the time he reached Virginia, he seemed to be doing just fine. He had made his way into the mountains of Nelson County and taken on a stretch.
bro, this just looks crazy, bro. Like, I'm sorry, I just would never like hiking something like this, bro. You have no convenience store near, nothing, no emergency near, just a hope. You better hope your phone has a signal, bro. Like,
Of trail near the Priest, a rugged.
and then you gotta remember the wildlife, bro. You got hungry grizzly bears, you know what I'm saying, rabid wolves and shit, like snakes
where
probably,
the Appalachian Trail climbs above 4,000
panthers and
feet.
shit,
And
lions.
then he may have felt like he had found his rhythm. Then, somewhere around July 31, things went quiet. That was the last point at which anyone is known to have seen or heard from Scott. What investigators believe is that Scott may have been heading toward Cow Camp Gap Shelter, a well-known community-used simple wooden structure along the trail. That would have made sense. The Cow Camp Gap was a logical next stop on his journey. From there, he may have planned to continue into Buena Vista, a small town along the trail with supplies. If that was his plan, there was nothing unusual about it. That is how life on the Appalachian Trail works. Hikers move from one shelter area to the next. And sometimes, because everyone is spread out and moving at their own pace, people disappear from each other's view for hours or even days without it seeming alarming at first. It is a very isolating place. So, for a while, Scott's absence may not have looked like a crisis. But somewhere in that ordinary gap, something went terribly wrong. On August 12, 2011, nearly 2 weeks after Scott was last known to be on that stretch of trail, a group of hikers made a horrifying discovery near the side trail leading to Cow Camp Gap Shelter. They found a body.
My man Ryan with the 10 gifted. Thank you so much.
Scott Lilly. Right away, they found a body in a shallow grave. It was Scott Lilly. Right away, it was obvious this was not a simple wilderness death. Someone had tried to hide what happened to him. Not very well, but enough to delay discovery. Investigators believed Scott had likely been dead for around 12 days by the time he was found.
Damn.
That meant he had probably died not long after the last known stretch of his hike near the Priest in late July. And the location only made the case more unsettling. Cow Camp Gap was not some foreign corner of the mountains. It was part of a well-used recreation area. Hikers passed through it, campers even used it. It was secluded enough for someone to hide a body, but not so remote that no one would ever come across it. That meant whoever put Scott there either took a major risk or felt comfortable doing it. Months later, investigators released one of the case's most disturbing details. In January 2012, the medical examiner officially ruled Scott's death a homicide. His cause of death was asphyxia by suffocation. Some of his belongings were also missing and never recovered. Among them were his backpack, his relatively new trail shoes, a Nintendo game.
And that's another thing too. On top of that, man, when you hiking and like anybody, FTC brothers and sisters, man, like you gotta remember, like we hiking and stuff. This outside of just looking, making sure for the animals and all this wildlife, bro. You got some weird ass fucking people in there that literally just fucking they just sit in the forest and just prey on people. You know what I'm saying? And just do weird shit too.
An Appalachian Trail handbook. That immediately
like whoever
raised
did that to him, that dude was probably he probably is a fucking serial killer. He probably got like 25 plus bodies just from like creeping and preying on niggas in the forest, bro. Like that is
question. Was Scott killed for his gear, or were those items taken for some other reason entirely? Investigators never publicly gave a clear answer. Because the killing happened on federal land, the FBI took charge of the case. They worked alongside National Park Service Rangers, U.S. Forest Service officers, Virginia State Police, and local authorities. Agents and officers collected more than 100 pieces of evidence. They covered more than 270 miles of trail. They conducted 83 interviews of hikers in the area at the time across multiple states and even in 2 foreign countries. 1 year after Scott's murder, the FBI even announced a $10,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of his killer. But despite all of
100
that,
gifted
the
for
case
flight to
never
stop
broke
smoking
open.
for a week.
No suspect was publicly. I even announced a $10,000.
Nah, I realistically just not gonna do that, bro. I'm not gonna sit there and lie to you, bro.
A reward for
I appreciate the offer, brother.
Arrest and conviction of his killer. But despite all of that,
SG with the one
broke
gift
open.
there.
No suspect was publicly identified, and no final timeline was
I could
established.
if I was an evil and awful person, I could have just lied right there, just like, oh yeah, sure, bro, go for it, and just motherfucking put some Vicing in every stream for the next week. Niggas wouldn't have even known. Like, nah, I'm not gonna lie to you like that, bro.
Never found out exactly what happened to Scott Lilly in his final hours on the trail, which sparked much speculation. Some seem to paint the area around Cow Camp Gap as an area crawling with dangerous mountain recluses or hidden predators waiting just off the trail. But that image does not really hold up. This was a well-used area and not some lost world cut off from everybody else. And that may be one of the creepiest parts of all. He disappeared along a route hikers used all the time. Then, somewhere in that stretch of Virginia backcountry, he crossed paths with the wrong person. And exactly what happened next has remained unknown to this day.
Damn. They always get away with it too in the forest, man.
Derek Lueking. Before Derek Lueking disappeared into the Great Smoky Mountains, a section of the Appalachian Mountains in March 2012, the people closest to him had already started to feel like something was wrong. In the months leading up to his disappearance, his father noticed changes in his 24-year-old son. Derek had started drinking and smoking, which his family considered unusual for him. He also seemed unhappy with where his life was heading. The mystery began on March 15, 2012, when Derek did not show up for work. No one could reach him as calls to his phone went unanswered. A mutual friend eventually alerted his roommate, Ryan, and from there the concern escalated fast. Ryan contacted Derek's family, and the Luekings drove through the night from Virginia to Tennessee. Once they arrived, they started digging through anything that might explain where he had gone. On Derek's computer, they found searches related to Great Smoky Mountains National Park. They also found a hotel reservation. That meant Derek had not just disappeared at random. He had made some kind of plan. And for whatever reason, that plan had led him toward the North Carolina side of the Smokies.
Damn.
Why? That was the question hanging over everything from the beginning. 2 days later, on March 17, surveillance footage captured Derek leaving the Microtel Inn and Suites in Cherokee, North Carolina at around 4 o'clock in the morning. He was carrying only a day pack. That was the last confirmed sighting of him. After that, Derek effectively walked out of view and never came back. Inside his hotel room were details that only made the case stranger. His family found a Bible on the bed and a liquor bottle on the floor. It suggested he may have been wrestling with something emotional, spiritual, or both. Later that same morning, around 8:30, Derek's white Ford Escape was found at Newfound Gap high in the Smokies, near the Tennessee-North Carolina line.
Right,
His family came across it by sheer luck while searching for him. Inside the vehicle was a note. Its message was short but chilling. "Do not follow me." But despite this note, people did, because by that point the case no longer looked like a man taking a private trip. It looked like a disappearance headed towards something much worse, and what investigators found inside the SUV only deepened the mystery. Derek had bought a surprising amount of outdoor gear. There were maps of the national park, a tent, a sleeping bag, food, cord, cutting tools, lights, and other survival items. It looked like the setup for a serious wilderness outing, but there was one major problem. Derek had left most of it behind. His wallet and cash were still in the car too. The scene made almost no sense. If he meant to survive in the backcountry, why walk away from the very gear that would have made that possible? This contradiction has haunted the case ever since. Maybe Derek only planned to take a short walk in return for the rest of the stuff. Maybe he was trying to imitate the stripped-down survival style of Man vs. Wild, a show his family said he liked. Maybe he never had a coherent wilderness plan at all. Or maybe someone else entered the picture after he arrived at Newfound Gap. Search and rescue teams soon moved into the area. About 60 people and 3 dog teams took part, covering more than 70 miles of trail around the parking area. They checked places where someone could have left the trail, pushed into the brush, and disappeared. Rangers asked if anyone had seen Derek, a young man matching his description, or anything unusual around Newfound Gap that day. And this is where the case gets even stranger. It was a sunny day. People were out hiking, picnicking, and moving through the area, yet no dependable witnesses ever emerged to place Derek there. There was one possible sighting along Newfound Gap Road that suggested he may have entered the woods from there, but that lead led nowhere. Then, the case took an even darker tone. Around the same time Derek vanished, another young man disappeared in the same general area of the Smokies. His name was Michael Giovanni Cacchini. Friends last saw him on March 18, 2012, just a day after Derek was last captured on surveillance video. During the search for Derek, rangers found Michael's abandoned vehicle parked along a walkway off Newfound Gap Road. It was an odd place to leave a car overnight, and not the kind of spot where someone on a normal hiking trip would be expected to begin a backcountry trek. Like Derek, Michael was heavily searched for and not found during the initial effort. Months later, a backpack and human remains were discovered in the park near the area connected to his disappearance. The remains were eventually identified as Michael's, giving one of the two disappearances a grim ending, but not a clear explanation. The question of if the cases were related began to arise. But Derek's case continued to make no progress. Every theory seemed to hit a wall. One possibility is that he went into the wilderness on purpose and intended not to come back, whether to take his life or somehow start a new one in the woods. The note in his car immediately points people in that direction, but even that theory has problems. If Derek meant to disappear in the mountains and possibly take his life, why buy so much survival gear first? Another theory is that he wanted some kind of survival challenge. But again, why even buy the gear then in the first place? Then there is the possibility of foul play. Maybe Derek meant to scout the area and return for the rest of his gear, and during that window he crossed paths with someone who had malicious intentions. Maybe the note was genuine, or maybe it was meant to mislead whoever found the car. But that theory has problems too. There is no body, blood, torn clothes, confirmed witnesses, or any definitive sign of an attack or abduction. More than a decade later, Derek Lueking is still missing.
Wow, man. Notice how none of them they catch him.
Louise Chaput. Louise Chaput was the kind of person people remembered fondly. She was 52 years old, a mother of two, and by all accounts, deeply compassionate. She loved the outdoors, forests, mountains, and quiet places were where she found peace. So when plans for a hiking trip with friends fell through in November 2001, Louise did not cancel the trip. Instead, she decided to go alone. She packed up her silver Ford Focus station wagon, left Quebec, and drove south toward New Hampshire. Her destination was Pinkham Notch Lodge in the White Mountains section of the Appalachian Mountains. She planned to spend just a few days there and be back home in time for work on Monday, November 19. It sounded simple enough, but the place she was heading toward had a reputation of its own. Mount Washington is beautiful, but it's also notoriously dangerous. The area is known for brutal weather, lethal cold, and conditions that can turn deadly with almost no warning. Louise knew that. She had climbed Mount Washington before and had grown up hiking and skiing. She crossed into the United States through the state of Vermont shortly before noon on Thursday, November 15. By mid-afternoon, she reached the visitor's center area. Louise stopped in and asked where she could take a short walk to stretch her legs after the long drive. She wanted something easy and brief to kick off her multi-day trip, something she could finish before dark. The clerk directed her to Lost Pond Trail. It was just across the road from the lodge, a major fact that makes her case so unsettling. Louise had not set out on some extreme backcountry adventure. This was just a short walk. But somewhere between that simple plan and the end of the day, Louise vanished. When she failed to return to Quebec and did not show up for work on Monday, alarm bells went off. Her boyfriend contacted authorities in New Hampshire and the search began. Their immediate thinking was the weather played a part. And at first, that assumption made perfect sense. Louise had gone alone into a mountain region famous for harsh weather, steep terrain, and sudden danger. In late November, even a short walk can become serious if someone slips, gets turned around, or spends too long out in the cold. Everything about the setting pointed in that direction. But searchers would soon find one important clue. Louise's silver Ford Focus station wagon was still in the visitor center parking lot. The search unfolded in exactly the kind of conditions that make the White Mountains so feared. Dozens of people from the New Hampshire Fish and Game, Mountain Rescue Services, Androscoggin Valley Search and Rescue, and the U.S. Forest Service headed into the area. They were met by high winds, blowing snow, and bitter cold. Wind chills dropped well below zero. If a missing person is injured or exposed in those kinds of conditions, every hour counts. But the first day produced nothing.
Bro, like, my thing is that, like, you know, like, the conditions already. You heard about the stories. You heard about, you know what I'm saying, the problems, and you still, like, you know, want to go hiking. It's like, I would think you would have one or two people tell you, like, in your ear, like, hey, this isn't a good idea. Maybe you should hike here. Maybe you should bring, like, 4 or 5 friends with you. Shout out to YK.
somewhat, and a helicopter from the U.S. Army National Guard joined the search.
It's like, what are they getting from this? Is this like adrenaline or something? I've never been hiking in my life. Obviously, it's an exercise, but it's like, with this type of hiking, do you get like some type of adrenaline? Does it do something for your mental or something? Like,
but still nothing. Louise.
Bro, this nigga said, did you count the sheep jumping the fence? Nobody was falling asleep. Niggas is vibing, bro. Bro, some of y'all have like TikTok fucking brain, dude. You have an IQ of a puppy ant, bro. I don't need to be fucking like this. Holy, like every 30 seconds. Like, bro. Are you like new to me or something, man? You've been wearing that shit over your head for a week, or I only wear it when I'm on stream so it doesn't hit the side of my head. Nice rage bait. 3 out of 10, buddy. What the fuck? I don't even know how to say your name. Bro was drunk when he was typing his name. I would have gave it a donkey day. I just can't read your name,
vanished into one of the
fucking made my head hurt. This nigga had, his name was like D's and with like 3 E's, Z's, bro. Don't be drunk next time you make your username, bro.
best known mountain areas in New Hampshire without leaving behind any clear explanation. And because of where she disappeared, most people
naturally that shit was funny though. Niggas said I'm counting the sheep. Wow.
First, she could have suffered a fall or succumbed to exposure.
It's a serious video, man. Y'all can't be cracking jokes, bro.
Lost in the wilderness. Anything was a possibility, which made the search for her that much harder. Then, on the afternoon of Thursday, November 22, Thanksgiving Day in the U.S., the search came to an end. Members of the New Hampshire Fish and Game found Louise's body, and the location only made things stranger. She was not found far from where her car had been parked, close to the trailhead and only a short distance from a well-used area. At first, the public details were limited, and in a place like that, most people still assumed the mountain had claimed another life. But 2 days later, that assumption collapsed. The medical examiner ruled Louise's death a homicide. Louise had been stabbed multiple times. Everything about it was set up to look like a wilderness tragedy. A solo hiker, a dangerous mountain range, bad weather, lied what looked like a missing hiker case turned out to be a murder.
Praise on somebody in the fucking mountains with snow, cold weather. You got it, bro. You got to be off of earth with that shit, man.
And no suspect was ever identified. More than 2 decades later, her case is still unsolved.
Shit's sad, man. Nobody ever gets caught from these, man.
Trenny Gibson. On October 8, 1976, 16-year-old Trenny Gibson went on a school trip to the Great Smoky Mountains with about 40 other students from Barrett High School in Knoxville, Tennessee. She was quiet, well-liked, and interested in plants. In school, she was taking horticulture and hoped to study landscape architecture. A trip into the mountains was exactly the kind of thing she would have been excited about. The group was headed to Andrew...
Bro, y'all, chat. Stop cracking jokes. This is a serious video. I'm about to give a few y'all niggas detentions, bro. Y'all niggas need to be taking y'all notes and motherfucking like, bro.
Bald and Kwohi. The weather, though, was not great. It was damp, chilly, and poor enough that the trip could have easily been canceled. Trenny was also underdressed. She had left her coat behind.
Yeah, I meant to react. I'm gonna do that in a future stream. I wanted to react to that Colorado killer thing.
Ended up hiking in a blouse.
If y'all seen that yet, don't watch it though. If you already,
Another student, Robert Simpson, loaned her his wool jacket. The students were told to stay on the trail, not go beyond Andrews Bald, and be back at the bus by 3:30 that afternoon. After they reached Andrews Bald and ate lunch, Trenny separated from Robert at around 1:30 p.m. He later said she wanted to head back towards the bus while he stayed behind. As she made her way back, other students saw her along the trail. One girl walked with her briefly. Another group invited her to stop and sit down, but Trenny kept going. One student later recalled that Trenny seemed to be in a hurry. Then, at about 2:50 that afternoon, witnesses saw her walk a little further ahead, stop, bend down, and step off the trail to the right by herself. This was the last confirmed sighting of Trenny Gibson. When students got back to the bus around 3:30, it became clear something was wrong. Trenny was not there. Her teacher, Wayne Dunlap, started looking for her almost immediately.
All right. Hey, Maz, put it in a emote, because y'all niggas is taking it too far. I was joking with y'all for like 30 seconds, but bro, like, nigga, we up. You TikTok fucking dweebs, bro. Like, nigga, everything doesn't need a reaction. I already told y'all earlier on that I'm fighting the cold already. But some of y'all have the IQ of a puppy squirrel, bro. It's like you can't. Should we put it in W mode? Let's try W mode. If they still try, put it back in a mode. I don't want to ruin it for the niggas that's actually vibing here. Y'all some niggas. Some of y'all gotta go study for your final exam, man. Y'all know the finals are coming up, man. Some of y'all got 1.5 GPAs, man. Come on. Can we watch the rest of the video in peace, please? Thank you.
4:30 p.m., rangers had been contacted and the case became an official missing person search inside the Appalachian Mountains. And the timing was awful. Evening was coming on and rain, fog, wind, and falling temperatures were moving in. The trails were slick with wet leaves and visibility was getting worse by the hour. Even so, those looking for her would find evidence that Trenny may not have been alone. Searchers found broken undergrowth near the place where Trenny was last
that
seen.
walk looks fucking
Nearby were 3
crazy.
cigarette butts and unbroken the trails were slick with wet leaves and visibility was getting worse by the hour. Even so, those looking for her would find evidence.
Bro, if you make one wrong step,
that Trenny may not have been alone. Searchers found broken undergrowth near the place where Trenny was last seen. Nearby were 3 cigarette butts and a partially consumed can of beer, suggesting that someone else may have been in that area. The strongest lead came from the tracking dogs. After being given Trenny's scent, they followed it past the Kawohi Tower lookout point and toward a spot roughly 1.5 miles away.
Yo, shots, thanks for the raid.
Some thought Trenny may have moved toward the road rather than simply wandering deeper into the wilderness. The search grew quickly. Over the course of the broader search, roughly 756 people took part. And despite all of that, nothing conclusive was ever found. The FBI opened an investigation and looked into possible sightings that were reported. None of them led anywhere. The dead ends didn't seem to make any sense. She was not alone in the deep wilderness. She was on a school trip on a marked trail in one of the most visited parts of the mountains. Then she stepped off the trail for just a moment and vanished. One theory is that she made it to the road and encountered the wrong person. Others believe someone around her that day knew more than they ever admitted. But nearly 50 years later, there is still no body, no proven crime scene, and no clear answer as to what happened to her.
Man, y'all gotta be careful. I feel like, man, if you're going on hikes, bro, you need to go with at least 4 people. And even still, in her situation, she went with the group. They said she, did something, and then they just never seen her again.
Thelma Melton.
Shit's sad, man.
On November 25, 1981, 58-year-old Thelma Melton, known to her friends as Polly, went for what should have been an easy afternoon walk in the mountains. That day, Polly set out on the Deep Creek Trail in the Appalachian Mountains with 2 friends, Pauline Cannon and Trula Gudger. It was one of her favorite hikes, a familiar trail that was well used and easy to follow. The weather was warm, the creek was shallow because of drought, and the trail was busy enough that other hikers were often around. Nothing about the setting screamed danger. At first, the walk seemed normal and Polly was in good spirits. She had even made homemade spaghetti sauce before leaving and expected to be back later that day to finish the ordinary routines of her life. About an hour into the hike, around 4 p.m., the 3 women reached the turnaround point and started heading back. And that is where the case takes a strange turn. Polly, who had been walking more slowly than usual earlier in the day, suddenly picked up speed. One of her friends even joked that they weren't going to race her. Polly turned, laughed, and kept going. It was the last normal moment anyone had with her. That sudden burst of pace stood out because Polly was not young. She was a heavy smoker and had high blood pressure. She was not the sort of person anyone would expect to suddenly power away down a trail for no clear reason. But that is exactly what she seemed to do. She moved ahead of her friends, went over a rise in the trail, and disappeared from sight. At first, her friends were not alarmed. They assumed Polly was joking around or hurrying back to check on her
This is
husband,
18
Robert, who was
days
waiting
in a
back
row
at the
streaming?
trailhead. But when they came over the same
I
rise
lost count,
themselves, she was gone. Her friends still tried to make it fit an ordinary explanation. But when they got back and Robert said Polly had not returned yet, the situation changed immediately. By then, she had been out of sight for close to an hour.
I thought it was like 13 or
and
12.
one
Yeah,
small
that's what I
detail
said.
would
12.
linger afterward.
13.
Just before she disappeared over the hill, her friend said Polly had paused and waved. It was such an ordinary gesture, the kind that means nothing in the moment until it becomes the last thing anyone remembers. Her friends and their husbands went back out to retrace the route. They asked other hikers if anyone had seen her. No one had. And that made the case even stranger. The Deep Creek Trail was popular and it was close to a parking area. It was certainly busy enough that someone should have noticed a woman like Polly if she'd simply kept walking. By about 6 p.m., park rangers were contacted, and about an hour later, a formal search was underway. At first, searchers thought they had at least one useful detail. Polly's shoes had a distinctive line across the sole that made her tracks easier to identify, but that clue went nowhere almost immediately. The trail was too busy and too many other people had passed through. Investigators couldn't even determine where Polly had left the trail at all. Over the weekend, the search grew. Volunteers joined park rangers, bloodhounds were brought in, and the trail was closed. In the end, roughly 150 volunteers and 9 search dogs took part. And then came one of the strangest details in the whole case. When the dogs were taken to the point where Polly had been last seen, they reacted strongly. They picked up her scent, but instead of carrying it down the trail or off into the woods, they circled the area and howled. It It was as if the trail simply ended where she vanished. Searchers found no clear path away from the point or obvious sign that she had wandered into the forest. There was no evidence of a struggle. No clothing, no dropped belongings, nothing. Rangers also ruled out some of the more dramatic natural explanations. The temperatures were mild, so exposure was unlikely. Animals in the area were also not considered large enough to drag her out of sight. Later, once leaves began to fall and visibility improved, a helicopter surveyed the area from above. Still, nothing. The search continued for 5 days and officially ended on October 2. But the mystery only deepened once investigators started looking at Polly's life in the days before she disappeared. A pastor who knew Polly said she had seemed somewhat depressed after her mother's recent death. There was also an issue with missing Valium, an anxiety medication. Robert told investigators that his prescription bottle was gone, raising the possibility that Polly had taken it. This opened the door to a different theory. Maybe she had been more depressed than anyone realized and she meant to harm herself. Or maybe she took the medication, became disoriented, and somehow wandered off in a way searchers never thought of. Some people wondered if
that's
Polly
the scary part too, man. Like if something happens in like these forests or mountains and they just wander off, and not even wander off, if something happens where they're just so out of like the, I guess, boundary where they are able to search for, like
to leave voluntarily, and I think that was built around a few strange facts. She skipped the
because they, after a certain point, I wouldn't say give up. They, if you want to call it that, they call off the search.
She was expected to attend.
They don't search it forever.
Reportedly made unusual phone calls preceding her disappearance. There was a parking area and a road not far from where she disappeared, and her sudden burst of speed on the trail could look less random if she was hurrying to meet someone. Months later, that theory picked up one more odd detail. A check made out to Polly was cashed in Birmingham, Alabama, where her family had roots. But even that lead went nowhere. Investigators never established who cashed it. And if Polly really had chosen to run off and start over, she did it in a way that required abandoning her medication, identification, clothes, and everyone who knew her. Her family believed that sounded nothing like her. Then there's the possibility of foul play. Her family seemed to lean toward this idea. Polly was walking alone while wearing jewelry, and she disappeared near a road and parking area. In theory, she could have been lured away, forced into a car, or picked up by someone. But that theory has its own problem. Deep Creek Trail was public and busy, open enough that an attack or abduction should have drawn attention. And yet, no witness ever came forward with a convincing story of seeing Polly attacked, robbed, or taken. Polly Melton was declared legally dead in 1988, and her family eventually held a memorial for her. But the National Park Service still lists her as missing. And more than 4 decades later, the mystery has stayed the same. A woman on a familiar trail walked ahead of her friends, waved once, disappeared over a rise, and was never seen again.
What? Hey, man. Y'all be careful that like to go hiking out there to see brothers and sisters. You see from these 6 stories, man. Notice how they don't have one suspect on any of these.